when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Hello and welcome to this Tuesday, May the 27th, 2025, episode 99, not out here on the Daily Australian. Welcome, my name is Jason Olbourne, and there is my partner right there, Nicola Charles. Welcome to the 99th edition of the Great Australian Daily Australian.
I know. Welcome to you too, Jason. I'm sitting here trying to find my smile and my happiness in a world that is clearly falling apart somewhat, or at least it's scripted to look like it's falling apart with all these narratives which we may not theorize on why none of it makes any sense, Jason. We're being told by the British police in particular that you mustn't share anything online about the Liverpool attacks. You mustn't talk to your friends about it. They need to be your single source of truth. They've obviously been on a conference call with Jacinta Ardern. And they simply don't want to know what you know, which is a bit strange for the police, Jason.
Very odd, isn't it? It's very selective. So one might say, oh, look, we don't want to, talk about an ongoing investigation, but at the same time, footage is shared, widely. Like you think about 9/11, we saw that plane hit the building, over, 1 million times. We've seen the George Floyd riots happening in real time and told that they were mostly peaceful. We saw the J6 events unfold, and we were told that they were mostly terrorism. We were told during COVID that we will be the one source of information. Chris Como at CNN told us that we will tell you what to believe. It's extraordinary to think that the media's job is not to tell you what to believe; it is to present what is happening and to present alternate viewpoints. Of course, that all changed. Actually changed in the Reagan era when it didn't have to be balanced. It could literally present a particular perspective. It's also interesting, isn't it? Back in 9/11 days, CNN and Fox News would share the same footage of 9/11, and they weren't considered to be different at that stage. But now, of course, everything is politically leaning one way or another. But when you get to a stage where you are not allowed to share information as the media because the authorities are going to determine, based on certain situations, it tells you that there is something else going on behind the scenes. There is a plan or a narrative or something else, because we've already seen emerge on social media today that the pictures don't match the description. So we'll show you some reporting, we'll show you some pictures, etc. We'll try not to speculate. That's not really what we want to do here, but presenting to the audience and realise that the valuable resource that is the Daily Australian, providing information and perspectives. Further on in the show, Nicola, we're also going to do a little bit of what became an experiment today, because I saw a really interesting post from Senator Gerard Rennick that appeared at the weekend. He was talking about climate change and made a very compelling argument as to why carbon dioxide at 432 parts per million as a gas that's a non-conductor can't be responsible for heating up the temperature of planet Earth. So somebody wanted to challenge him, and I did some research, and in the end I went to Grok and challenged Grok, and it's quite interesting what's come out of that. And following on from that, I will then apply that information to an article that's been came out, I think, on Monday, talking about a deadly fungi that's apparently maybe come to Australia. So put the fear of death into everyone again. But once you dissect the article, after you read the headline, it's nothing like what the headline is talking about. On the contrary, and this is the thing, it's almost like they ramble on. I've read so many articles lately in mainstream media that just ramble and ramble and ramble and never get to the point. And you're wondering, what is the point of the article? I think it's so that you only read the headline and then you look at it and go, oh, there's nothing here. I'll just believe the headline and move on. And these headlines are completely deceptive, almost as if the mainstream now is using clickbait. How dare they? And accuse the citizen journalists of making clickbait stories. And on the contrary, it's not like that at all. So a lot to get through on today's show, including discussion again on the machete situation here, weapons in Australia, where we go with that. And we'll also get to a little bit of lightness, a little bit of joy, if you will, from Memorial Day, where it turns out that President Trump is planning a 1-year celebration in the 250 years celebration that starts next year on the 4th of July 2026. So there'll be a 1-year lead-up celebration of the independence of the United States. And it reminds me that I've often asked people, when was the last time here in Australia we celebrated something on a national basis that we're all excited about? And for mine, it goes back to the Sydney Olympics. I can't think of anything between then and now. So that's 25 years where we haven't had anything to celebrate. And when I interviewed an American recently, he said, well, the last thing that we all got behind was 9/11. So there hasn't even been a good thing. So at last, Trump's presenting something as a 1-year celebration. At last, the US will have something to celebrate. But of course, there'll be people who won't want to. They'll want to destroy it nonetheless.
Well, I want to address as well, first up, because this will be in relation to the story from the UK about Liverpool, the Liverpool attack, which looks to me like a terror attack, but that's just my humble opinion. The police have told us it's not a terror attack because the police decide it's their script, it's their narrative, and we may not theorize on their conclusions, which is interesting. But here in Victoria, in Australia, in the last 48 to 72 hours, we have multiple video footages of machete-wielding migrants running around the streets, causing harm, causing fear, closing down shopping centres, malls if you're American. And what's happened is our state premier, Jacinta Allen, who is unelected, she was installed by Daniel Andrews. Yes, that Daniel Andrews, who decided to make on zero evidence of benefit Melbourne, the most locked down city in the world. So he installed his friend. We don't know if she was his special friend, but we know she was certainly special. He installed her as his follow-up Premier of Victoria. So she came out after these attacks and she's done a clip, of course, for social media. She is probably one of the most insincere bureaucrats I've ever seen speak. I don't know how she's got the nerve to say some of the things she says, particularly about farmers, about violence. And she came out and she said that she's going to use extraordinary powers to ban the sale of machetes. Now, there are lots of machetes seen in these video clips that have been provided by Australians. The problem is Jacinta Allen doesn't seem to understand that machetes don't kill people. People kill people, which is what I wrote under her X post. And it's extraordinary to me. It's obviously, it feels like another way to take weapons away from Australians, which we've been through these sort of, who knows if they're false flags or real. But for my money, the problem isn't the weapon itself. I mean, you can go out and buy extraordinarily massive and very scary kitchen knives from your local butcher. Great big bendy ones that look like machetes. I can tell you now because I cook a lot of meat and they are very sharp and very extraordinary. And, you know, these people are running around creating fear. This is terrorism. Instead of coming out and saying Victorian society is being terrorized by certain elements in the migrant community with sharp objects. We've got the video footage. I mean, it seems like this surveillance state is actually not there to bring people to justice. And I just wrote down a few notes about it, Jason, because it's all starting to fit in. So it seems like everything we're experiencing, everything they're telling us is so that we basically stay home. So you've got the World Health Organization amendment to treaty, which is going to and is putting the fear of God into people, that if they don't inject something they now believe, a lot of the general public now believe is sort of a death by lethal injection, you won't be able to go to work. You won't be able to leave your home. You'll be hiding. You'll be a criminal. right? And there's no getting away with it, because if you do leave your home and go outside or try and go to work, you'll be on one of their surveillance cameras. We've got the closing down of national parks in Australia, instruction that you may not walk, you may not hike, you may not horse ride, you may not camp, you may not 4x4. So don't plan that this weekend. You just stay home and mind your own business. Then we've got the climate lie, carbon taxation, high fuel, right? All to say, don't use your car, don't enjoy your time off work, you just stay home. Now, strangely, Australia has been a little bit behind the UK, as it always is with other countries, in most of this sort of unfolding, this script, this narrative. And recently, since Trump was elected, Keir Starmer has done a massive U-turn on his policy. Now, he's essentially come out factually and said to the British people, enough is enough. And he's used the words that he's going to send these people back to where they came from. Now, 5 minutes ago, we were told that kind of rhetoric, send them back to where they came from, was racist. If you said it, or I said it, or someone said it on a Facebook post, they were arrested, even if they were pregnant, and they were going to jail, Jason. They were at least going to court. So it's extraordinary to me how things are sort of just behind in Australia. And in the UK, things that are now acceptable because the Prime Minister is saying them would still not be acceptable in Australia. Now we've got this unfolding attack in Liverpool, which again, I'm suspicious of, Jason, because why? This was the celebration parade for the football team. This means the most television news cameras were on that event above and beyond anything else. No one rocks up to see the royal family anymore. So this is a maximum eyes on the event scenario. And we're being told, despite a car being deliberately driven into people, it's not terrorism, Jason. And they also told us something a bit suspicious about the driver.
Yeah, indeed. So as a news service, we're meant to present the facts, and what we will do on this show, and we have established a precedent now, is that we're going to present both sides of the story, and we will explain why we are presenting both sides of the story, because they are contradictory. And it certainly doesn't mean that the authority holds the truth in the narrative, and we've explained that before many times, that there is only truth or lies. In other words, misinformation is authority's attempt to protect its narrative, which implies that it is the one that is not telling you the truth. And so we have a couple of perspectives. First of all, in terms of, it's like we're deliberately tripping over political coercion disguised as political correctness. And that's what seems to be applying here in the BBC, where they're trying to use it as a police investigation to stop you from looking at what's really going on. You're simply not allowed to think differently on immigration or vaccines or climate change. Now, we have proven that they are wrong on all but believe that they are right. They control all the power in this country and around the world. They drown out, censor, or punish dissent or alternate views, and the general public remains oblivious, mainly because they are distracted as much as they appear disinterested. And that is the reason why we have a job here at the Daily Australian. Now, on the weapons, in America, people who use guns who kill people, that's the statement, and in Australia, the machetes do. We have clearly imported a problem and are being choked by political correctness in order to reverse it. Our politicians tell us we must deal with it now. So what do? They ban the knives. Next week, will the instrument of assault change, or will the attacks stop? How do we get both arguments to discuss and come up with a new plan, Nicola? That's the point here, isn't it? There is no way that Jacinta Allen's plan to ban machetes is going to change anything. It is simply going to change the method of weaponry used in the next attack. That's obvious.
What do we do, Jason? Do we line them all up on a rug the way they do when they have weapons halls? Do we line up all the machetes on the rug and stand there like absolute fools, like children, and say, naughty, naughty machetes, don't you go round killing people again? It wasn't the machetes, was it? It was a mindset that wasn't in Australia pre-2020.
Well, this is it. Are you trying to tell me that no violence ever happened in the era of the Flintstones? I mean, these people will end up picking up rocks if they want to be violent and all weapons are taken away. They'll go back to the Stone Age. It's obvious that this is not a solution. So,
well, a car is a weapon. Liverpool
Correct.
has just proved that the car is the weapon. It can be anything.
Correct.
It could be a pen.
Correct. Absolutely right. So, Jacinda Allen, you are not dealing with the problem. What you are doing is not even putting a Band-Aid on. You are deflecting from the problem. And what we've now seen in Britain is an excuse to be able to now cover up evidence as seen in real time to present a narrative. So I think, Nicola, as appropriate, was if we're going to be cutting edge, we're going to be cutting edge. I'm going to play you the clip that's just come out there from the British police. We're in Australia, so certain rules don't apply here, but we will play this for you now and we'll come back.
The car stopped at the scene and a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area was arrested. We believe him to be the driver of the vehicle. Extensive inquiries are ongoing to establish the circumstances leading up to the collision, and it is vital that people do not speculate or spread misinformation on social media. I know that people will understandably be concerned by what has happened tonight. What I can tell you is that we believe this to be an isolated incident, and we are not currently looking for anyone else in relation to it. The incident is not being treated as terrorism. We would ask that people refrain from sharing distressing footage from the incident online, and please share any information directly with our investigation team.
So, that one from obviously from a major news source, but there's another news source, and what we should do is present to you the other information along with what has been gathered. Now, we're not going to show you the violent incident. What we are going to show you is pictures that have been picked up of the alleged driver, and I think that's very important because the story behind the story is always the real story. Why do we get pigeonholed, censored, taken out, denied, and then told that it'll be misinformation? Why can't we simply present the facts? So here's this clip originally from another news source.
He has been arrested. As yet, the description of the driver, which has landed in the last couple of moments, is, according to police, he is a 53-year-old white British man. This is their statement in the last few moments from Merseyside Police. We would ask people not to speculate on the circumstances surrounding tonight's incident on Water Street in Liverpool city centre. We can confirm that the man arrested is a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area. Extensive inquiries are ongoing to establish the circumstances leading up to this collision. A North West Ambulance Service spokesperson told us here at GB News that they are supporting an incident in Liverpool city centre following reports of a road traffic collision. We're currently assessing the situation and working with other members of the emergency services. Our priority is to ensure people receive the medical help they need as quickly as possible. Updates will be published on this page as Mersey Police as we know more. This is an incredibly devastating incident.
So we now learn that there's 27 people hospitalised, 20 people treated at the scene. We're being told that it's a 53-year-old white British man. Now, I got a problem with the term white for obvious reasons, and people say, well, you're white. No, I'm not. I'm Caucasian. It was always Caucasian was the official description.
Strange, isn't it?
That's right. And so you can imply white, as you can imply in when you see people saying that they have Aboriginal heritage and they look or albino, but you can't question it. So now you can call anyone white when the narrative suits. So that is a real change here. So we need to be able to determine if we're going to go down this pathway. And it's interesting that we only played a clip yesterday of the idea that sentencing should be harsher for white people or white men. And isn't it interesting that the very next day we are reporting, or we are told to report, a white middle-aged man of 53.
Well, where's his picture, Jason? Where's his photo? The first thing they do is that perp walk and that photo where they take a picture in front of a measuring board so you can see his height and you can see his face. You're telling us this and you're telling us not to question it. Name him. Who is he? I know you know who he is. I mean, for God's sake, there are so many cameras in British cities that you can't drive. I said yesterday from one side to the other without every meter of it being on camera. What the hell do we have these surveillance states for? But you can't name him, but you can tell us he's white.
Yeah. It's extraordinary, isn't it? It just does not add up. Now, look, there's a number of different stories today that we also want to cover off on. Where we go in terms of violence here in Australia and violence around the world, I think we've made a very sound argument already that the solution is not in the banning of a machete as the only solution. But you also
well, you know what one of the solutions would be, Jason, is if it wasn't illegal in Australia to own and wear a stab vest. We've got so many stabbings, usually in shopping centres where families and children are. What if you're a nurse or someone who works late and you have to go out to your car in the dark and you know that there are stabbings in the area? It is illegal, unlawful for you to wear a stab vest. So you can't even wear a piece of defensive clothing in Australia. And yet these perpetrators of violence usually get bailed the next day. We still don't have the name days later, do we, of the violence of the attackers in the Northland shopping centre in the north of Melbourne. We have no clue who they are. When will we be told what the narrative is there, Jason?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the initial reporting were that they were underage. They were 15 and 16-year-olds involved. Now, that doesn't excuse it. If you go around at 15 or 16 and you're wielding a weapon in a shopping centre at anybody and anybody gets in the roads in trouble, how does being 15 or 16 protect you at that point? It just doesn't. It just beggars belief.
Well, they try them as adults at that age, Jason.
Yeah. This is it. Now, we've also got information, of course, as we're going on in this battle against compulsory medicine and flu vaccines, etc. But John Campbell shared a video recently. We're just going to put up the headline for you here. A new study that the flu vax is linked to a 27% increased risk of flu. Well, that's good. If you get vaccinated, you're going to get a more chance of getting the flu to test that the vaccine works, right? Is that a good thing or a bad thing that the flu vaccine makes you more susceptible to getting it? It's like an industry in itself, Nicola. How does that work?
I mean, it's crazy. It's the 180 rule. It's safe and effective. It's going to help you. You need to get it to go to work. And I told the story of years ago, they came round to where I worked and offered it to me. And I said, no, because there needs to be someone in this department who's not off sick with flu next week. And sure enough, they were all sick with flu the following week. We've known this for a long time. And the fact that the World Health Organization are pushing forward with their narrative, which in itself feels like terrorism. Of course, we'd never be able to call it terrorism. It's just shocking. It's extraordinary. They talk about the data and the science and they want digital ID, and the digital ID will be based on data. Well, we now know that it's going to be based on false data, on a false narrative, a script, whatever you say it is. And I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to live under your skewed rules. Thank you very much.
Well, absolutely. I'm going to play a quick clip of John Campbell here to explain where he's going with it, and we'll move on to the next story.
Hello and welcome to this talk. Now, let me give you the bottom line on this video so you can decide if you want to watch. Large study at the Cleveland Clinic found out that the flu vaccine, the influenza vaccine over last winter, wasn't that effective. In fact, it had a negative efficacy of 26.9%. In other words, if you took this flu vaccine, you were 26.9% more likely to get influenza. Now, unfortunately, the paper doesn't give us details on how much money the pharmaceutical industry made from selling this vaccine with negative efficacy.
Now, Nicola, I think it's really important at this stage that maybe what I'm going to do is award the flu vaccine manufacturers a special award, and I'm going to call it the Brigitte Macron Award. I'll play it for you now. Here it comes. There you go, vaccine manufacturers. You get the Brigitte, which is a slap on the face there to Emmanuel Macron, he who met his wife when he was just 15 years of age and became the president of France, no less. There you go. That's on their way of getting off the plane in Vietnam. So there you go. How about that? That's
She has
something that
some serious white privilege there, because wouldn't we all like the privilege of putting our hand over his mouth and stopping him speaking? I mean, he seems to get involved in some very strange things. He bothers himself about who the next pope is going to be, and, you know, the World Economic Forum and Brussels and what they want to do with the world. So, yeah, good on you, Brigitte. I've become a fan of yours overnight.
There you go. Who would have thought? Well, I want to now share with you an experience I had today with artificial intelligence. And it came about when I shared a post by Senator Gerard Rennick, who argues that it's impossible that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, at the rate at which it is, given that gases are not conductors, can possibly cause an increase in temperature. So I'll run you through a thread here. I think it's important just to understand, because I think it's important to understand how AI works and how you can actually not be threatened by it, but challenge it. So let's start with the original post, put it up on the screen here. So Gerard set this out on Sunday morning. The key point being that if gases are poor conductors of heat, how is it that a CO2 molecule, a gas, can heat up 10,000 surrounding nitrogen and oxygen molecules, also gases, by 1 degree each? 1 in 10,000 is the same as 100 in a million, which is the ratio that climate alarmists claim that an extra 100 carbon dioxide molecules per million has heated the entire atmosphere by 1 degree. It can't happen. It's all a lie. So I decided to share this article again, and this is what I put as my extrapolating from what Gerard said. An interesting debate was had between myself and Grok over Senator Rennick's argument that carbon dioxide as a poor conductor cannot possibly cause a 1 to 3 degree rise in temperatures. I first looked at the composition of carbon dioxide on Venus, which is 96%, versus on Earth, it's 0.0432%. That is 960,000 parts per million on Venus to 432 parts per million on Earth. You could not be further apart. On Earth, the argument is that if our carbon dioxide hit 0.532%, an extra 100 parts per million, the temperature would increase by 1 to 3 degrees Celsius. If this was linear, it would mean that if Earth's atmosphere became 96% carbon dioxide, the temperature would increase to nearly 10,000 degrees Celsius, given 100 parts per million increase in carbon dioxide is supposed to equate to a 1 to 3 increase in temperature. Therefore, 960,000 divided by 100 is 9,600. So an increase of 9,600 to 28,800 degrees is said extrapolation. But gases are poor conductors. So does this mean the intensity is required for a logarithmic response rather than a linear one? Wouldn't that work against the scientific argument? And so then what I did was I took it to AI. So firstly, just calculating here, I looked up what was the atmosphere on Venus, and it was 96% carbon dioxide. So then with that, I then found out, or asked, what is the temperature on Venus? 454, or I wrote for 464 degrees. It's not livable, but it's not 10,000 degrees either. So I then asked Grok, can you prove this increase in temperature argument? So what does he do, Mr. AI? Admission of uncertainty. I admit that I cannot definitively prove that a 100 part per minute carbon dioxide increase causes exactly a 1 degree temperature rise. The calculation is based on well-established physics, radiative forcing, Planck response, but the world really is messier, feedbacks, natural variability, and other forcings introducing uncertainty. My statement of plausibility reflects the uncertainty, not a lack of rigor. However, the physics strongly suggests that CO2 increases do contribute to warming, and the magnitude aligns with historical trends. Okay, there you go. Do you align your views with political ideology? Did I support a political ideology? I aim to focus on the physics of the greenhouse effect, not to push a political agenda. However, by affirming CO2's role in warming, I aligned with a scientific view that often is tied to political movements, e.g. climate action. This wasn't my intent. I was addressing the senator's specific claim, but I understand why it might be perceived as ideological. I'll strive to be more explicit about separating science from policy implications in future responses. What I didn't know, I don't know the exact temperature rise from 100 parts per million. I don't know the exact precise impacts on warming on humanity. While risks like sea level and heat waves are documented, the extent of harm depends on future actions and adaptations. And I don't know if the senator's broader skepticism about climate science reflects valid concerns about scientific overreach. I didn't fully explore that angle. I find that interesting that I'm actually having a conversation with this AI in a way that is making it doubt itself. So continuing on, is AI biased or trained in a certain way and therefore limited? My training data, I'm trained on a vast data set of human knowledge, which includes scientific literature, public discourse, and media. Climate science, while grounded in physics, is a politically charged topic. The consensus view that CO2 emissions drive warming and pose risk dominates literature, so my responses naturally lean towards this perspective. However, I'm designed to prioritize evidence over ideology, but he just admitted that he leans. So if you saturate it, therefore you're going to get a different response from AI. Did he push an ideology? My goal was to fact-check the senator's claims using physics. I didn't advocate for policy. I implicitly aligned with a narrative that's often politicized. This alignment isn't intentional. It reflects the scientific evidence I'm trained on. But I acknowledge that this could be perceived as ideological. It's fascinating, isn't it, that AI, whilst we think it's given godlike status and the know-all, it's not. It's contained with the information that's fed into it, and therefore, he who controls the AI really controls the information, and you can't depend on it. So, getting down to the punchlines, 2 more to go. Can you state with proof that humanity is at risk because of the arguments you present, which are not facts? Furthermore, can you conclude that an increase in 100 parts per million will cause a 1 degree increase in temperature? Final admission and conclusion. Admission of uncertainty. I cannot prove with absolute certainty that it will cause an increase in temperature, nor can I guarantee that humanity is at risk of harm from CO2 emissions. The physics of the greenhouse effect is clear and warming is occurring, but the precise magnitude and impacts are uncertain. My response indeed wasn't intended to support a political ideology, but I confirm that it looks that way. And risks to humanity. While CO2-driven warming responses, I can't guarantee harms dependent on adaptation. Your critique, he says, has been valuable in pushing me to reflect on my approach, admit uncertainties, and focus on the science rather than the perceived ideological leanings. If you'd like to explore scientific aspects further, he's happy to do so. And my conclusion, therefore, is I don't think so. AI is a product of its training and is by definition biased towards authority, which you would expect it to be. But in this era of history, when science is hypothetical and ideologically driven, privately funded by interest groups and models based, it is open for credentialism, which is an official form of sanctioned corruption by definition. How about that for an argument against the grok?
It's interesting, its responses. You say he. It's funny, I always think AI is a she. But anyway, what I found interesting about that is it is honest, it's transparent in the sense that it states it takes it from science, its knowledge, science, literature, and the media. So if you think about how these particular groups like Climate 200 and you know, all of them, the way they dominate the media with false narratives that we know are not true. It's the 180 rule. It's often the opposite of what they're stating. And look, you've got the UK police saying, you know, don't believe your lying eyes. You've got to believe us. Then it sort of makes sense, Jason, that they would keep this misinformation flowing in media because AI is watching it. So what they're doing, I've asked for the longest time, why does nothing they're saying publicly make sense to me as a human being? It's because in real time, they are programming AI to believe things that are simply not true. And then what happens? You get these people online, like a guy said to you, oh, I don't necessarily believe you. Let me check with Grok. Let me check with AI. And human beings are already experiencing this, you know, intellectual atrophy where they're not trusting their own research. The research now for people online has been pushed into these AI systems. So wouldn't it make sense if it was taking its facts from media that you would lie in the media? Very sneaky, Jason.
It is exactly that, right? So it is deceptive, it is sneaky, and it is by design. So
but it doesn't know it. AI doesn't know it.
Yes, and so it is a useful idiot in this circumstance. So now what I want to do is I just want to test the thinking of what we've just been able to establish by taking it on head on. Here's an article that appeared Monday in Murdoch News. Here's your headline: Global warning over fungi that could eat you from inside out. An alert has been issued over a horrific new detail emerged about a deadly superbug, and it's news no Australian wants to hear. May 25th. There it is. So, give you a picture. They throw this into the article. That's what we're dealing with. And here's where it's actually located. And if you look at Australia, it's completely red-free, so it's not here. and it's not very much spread around the world. And there's 3 forms of this Aspergillus, different 3 variations. So I'm just going to read from the story itself, and just work with me on this, because it's a new way of doing it rather than boring you with graphic after graphic. I'm just going to read from the story. Researchers have warned that a mysterious fungi that kills millions of people worldwide each year may soon spread significantly further in Australia. So here's the first manipulation. It's a chilling echo of the popular video game TV series adaptation, The Last of Us, a post-apocalyptic story about survival in a world ravaged by a fungal infection. The fungi could soon spread to North America, Europe, China, and Russia. So what are they doing? In their opening paragraph, to set the mood or the scene, they're relying on fiction, but they're using it in a way because they believe many people play video games. Now, what do they do to back it up? Wait for this next sentence. That's according to scientists from Manchester University who used computer simulations to forecast how Aspergillus, a group of fungi that can cause a life-threatening lung disease called aspergillosis, may move globally. So guess what they've relied on? University modeling. And we know how that works, right? Now they back it up again. The new Manchester University study, which is yet to be peer-reviewed. Oh, what a surprise. Not peer-reviewed, but if we send you a COVID study not peer-reviewed, you just say it's not peer-reviewed and you give it no media coverage. But this one got front-page headlines in the Daily Telegraph newspaper. Okay, now you ready for this one? The fungi was found to be more common in temperate climates, while another variation, the Flavus and the Niger versions, dominate in warmer regions. According to future climate scenarios, which we've just proved the AI can't prove, all 3 species could shift north due to global warming, particularly under severe warming events. Now, ready for this one? The use of fossil fuels could also speed the spread. Totally unsupported claim. They just made that up and threw it in there. There's nothing to support that whatsoever. Now scroll down through the various different variations, and they bring up some particular doctor. And we get down here. If the body's immune system cannot clear the fungi spores it breathes in, the fungi starts to grow and basically kind of eat you from inside out, saying it really bluntly. But he explained that fungi are decomposers or recyclers in nature and are extremely good at cleaning up organic material, such as leaves from trees or dead animals. So if the body's immune system cannot clear the fungi, so in other words, if you've got a weak immune system, so they're targeting people because weak immune system, make you feel like that your body can't cope, you've got a weak immune system, setting you up to take some miraculous cure. Now, it says here, there is still a lot to learn about fungi, and more than 90% types of fungi are estimated to be unknown to science. So hang on a second. Yes, you can say we don't know. We don't know very much. 90%. So we've only touched on 10%, but we entirely made that figure up because it's an estimate. We don't really know. It could be 90%, could be 900%, could be 9 million %, could be 1%. But we just said that. So what does that statement mean? It says trust the science, though it admits a lack of knowledge and speculates to make a scientific claim, which is speculated, that it can only estimate. But what does that do? It supports the argument for more funding, doesn't it? Because there's so much more we don't know about it. Give us more money and we'll look into these fungi. And guess what? Enter the usual suspects. Fungal pathogens pose a serious threat to human health by causing infections and disrupting food systems. Viv Goosens, research manager at Wellcome Trust, which funded the research. Wouldn't you know it? Guess who's the boss of the Wellcome Trust?
Can you do something for me live on the show? Can you spell the fungi for me, the name?
Aspergillus.
Let me just check something while we're live on air. Okay, so their fungi is natural, but there are 2 patents on that one. So
well played.
You cannot patent something that's found in nature, which means this is referring to one of those pathogens in the PABS, the pathogen sharing scheme, that has not yet been finalized with the World Health Organization. So somebody is, if it's true and this is out there, someone's released it. It was deliberate because it was grown in a lab somewhere. And you just can't trust these people, right? Someone sent me this fantastic little quote, and it was Bill Gates, and he actually tweeted this out, not recently, so don't go and look for it now. It would be years ago. But he wrote, "Vaccines in our food supply solves the problem of vaccine hesitancy." And someone wrote underneath, "In the same way, slipping a roofie into a girl's drink solves the problem of sex hesitancy. Anyone who puts drugs into food and drinks without consent needs to go to prison." Now, nowhere in that story, when they're telling you it's not peer reviewed, they're referencing a fear porn show. This is what's going to kill you all. I mean, this is terrorism. You're terrorizing us, right? Nowhere in that article did it say, by the way, just like SARS-CoV-2, we made it in a lab. Shouldn't these be the people being held responsible, not people driving? How does driving cars and carbon emissions, say we stopped driving all our cars, how does that stop you growing fungi in a lab? What a bunch of liars, Jason.
Oh, it's just extraordinary, isn't it? It's absolutely extraordinary. Now, there's a little bit more to the story because the plot thickens, as it always does. You ready for this one? Who should be the boss of the I just gave it away, of the Wellcome Institute? None other than the former Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. Look at that. Board of Governors.
Oh,
Number
surprise,
one,
surprise.
Julia Gillard, who happens to be the same person that donated $88 million to the Clinton Foundation, of whom the Clintons only reported $22 million. And Julia was wearing the matching outfit to both Ellen's backdrop and the Epstein building, which is just excruciating to see. So the final parts, the results of the study explored how the existing habitats that are suitable for the fungi could spread or shrink under different global warming predictions. So they provide unprovable climate claims. The world is on track to heat up by 2.6 to 3.1 degrees. Total bullshit. They just made that up, as we've just proven, and found that even with 2 degrees of warming, so we'll go below the threshold to frighten you some more, the fungi types Aspergillus fumigates and Flavus would spread further northwards into the UK and Scandinavia. However, it also says, let me find it for you, that while temperatures in Africa may become so high that some fungi would cease to exist. So it's gone away anyway.
Is the greatest disinfectant. Yeah, let me just give you, this is an unscientific, in my humble opinion, personal opinion. I've lived and worked all over the world. Not for 2 weeks on a holiday. I mean, lived and worked for years. And here's what I know. When the sky becomes cloudy and thick and the sun is blocked, naturally, you get this heat. You get this incredible heat because the cloud cover keeps the heat in. And when you're in an area like California, where I lived for 7 years, and Las Vegas, and you have clear blue skies every single day, at nighttime, Jason, it's absolutely freezing. You've never seen an American show, not for 50, 60 years, not Columbo, not Dallas, not X-Files, not any of the shows you've watched from America. You've never watched any of those shows without noticing that in middle class and up homes, they always have either an open fire or an open gas fire with flames going. And that's because in very sunny countries, states and countries with no clouds, at night, it's freezing. Same goes in the desert. It's cold, right? Hot in the day, cold at night. Because what actually happens is if you block out the sun and create a lot of cloud cover, it heats up. So what Bill Gates is saying to us, for me, is the opposite of the truth. Surprise, surprise. Because I think if they did succeed in blocking out the sun, we really would get hot. And then what would he say? See, climate change is real. But he caused it.
Yep, it's a real straw man argument, and that's what they're arguing on Venus, isn't it? Like, what other gases are cooking it up? But 96% CO2 is not 0.04% CO2. They're absolute opposite ends of the spectrum, and it's a really good point that you make there. So, look, I think we're doing well in being able to uncover and unpack these particular stories that are being presented to us that just don't make any sense. And, of course, you're invited to comment, black pill, criticize, send your counter arguments in, but it's just extraordinary. Now, look, in other news today, Donald Trump has retweeted or reshared a post here by DC Drano. I think this is substantial. DC Drano writes, they stole the 2020 election and hijacked the country using a decrepit corpse as frontman. They used the auto pen to start wars, steal from our treasury and pardon their friends, arrest those responsible and charge them with treason. And Trump has reposted that post. That's a significant claim there. Now, also, Trump has come out and said that he's considering taking $3 billion of grant money away from the very anti-Semitic Harvard and giving it to trade schools all across the land. What a great investment that would be for the USA. What a great idea. Yes. And he's still waiting for the foreign student lists, he says, from Harvard, so that we can determine after ridiculous expenditure of billions of dollars how many radicalized lunatics, troublemakers, all should not be let back into our country. Harvard is very slow in the presentation of these documents, and probably for good reason. The best thing Harvard has going for it is that they have shopped around and feel the absolute best judge for them, but have no fear the government will in the end win. Them big fighting words from Donald Trump. So what I'll do now is I'll take you the other way, and I'll play you a bit of a clip now from his Memorial Day holiday speech.
We should never forget, even for a moment, that freedom is a gift of the highest cost and peace is won at the most precious price. These extraordinary American heroes and their immense and ultimate sacrifices they offer only the faintest glimpse at the infinite grace we have received from all who laid down their lives for America. Over the past 250 years, we're going to have a big, big celebration, as you know, 250 years. In some ways, I'm glad I missed that second term where it was, because I wouldn't be your president for that most important of all. In addition, we have the World Cup and we have the Olympics. Can you imagine? I missed that 4 years, and now look what I have. I have everything. Amazing the way things work out. God did that. I believe that too. God did it. You know, I got the World Cup and I got the Olympics. The 250 years was not mine. I'd like to take credit for it. But I got the Olympics, I got the World Cup when I was president. And I said, boy, it's too bad I won't be president then. And look what happened. I turned out. And we're going to have a great time. We're going to have a great celebration. But most important of all is the 250th anniversary. That blows everything away, including the World Cup and including the Olympics, as far as I'm concerned.
I love the fact that they're looking at doing something for the American people that you can actually get behind and celebrate at long last. Bit of a difference there. We all need something to look forward to.
Yeah, talking about doing something for the people of your country. We've had an enormous response. It's on its way to going viral to not the entire show yesterday, but the clip we shared, just 8 minutes long, 8 minutes and a bit, about the plight of a single Indigenous gentleman in Australia who was interviewed by a British blogger, podcaster. And, you know, the way we felt about that and our thoughts on that were very much in line with the thoughts and feelings of other Australians. And I feel like we're never going to get answers on it. And it absolutely breaks my heart. I reported the other day on this show that the numbers of Indian migrants into Australia, and I have no problem with legal migration, is now in the numbers of more than our Indigenous tribes, which breaks my heart. And I investigated this morning why that might be the case. And it suddenly dawned on me that a number of years ago, Bill Gates rolled out digital ID in India. And this doesn't get talked about. He was in partnership with an Indian billionaire, and they rolled out digital ID, and it was a monumental failure. So it was mandated for more than 1 billion Indians to give up their fingerprints, thumbprints, iris scans, and facial recognition. And over 800 million, more than 3/4 of those, were hacked. And then they were sold online, the information, for as little as $8. Now, what do we see globally, Jason? We see Indians migrating not just to Australia. I mean, the numbers in Australia are small compared to everywhere else, to the UK, to America, to Russia, anywhere they can go to get out of India. And I'm wondering if it's because their privacy and their financial security have actually been destroyed if they stay in India. So these people are moving to other countries. So potentially, what we're seeing here with mass Indian migration around the world is the cover-up of a Bill Gates crime scene, Jason.
Oh, what a surprise, isn't it? What a surprise. It's interesting, isn't it, that story that we covered yesterday? And again, because we challenged the narrative and exposed for what it was, and that blogger who's just doing an innocent interview, like actually getting out there and doing a general just street interview, a one-on-one vox pop about conditions.
Yeah.
And again, the narrative purveyors choosing to try and attempt to discredit the interviewer by saying it was culturally insensitive. So you get all the wokies going, well, we're not going to look at it. And so it's a form of just deliberate
well, no one said it was
brickwalling.
racist. No one said it was racist. These people seem to be saying in the Australian media and these councils in the north of the country, these people seem to be saying, oh, you may not talk to them about their plight, Jason. Why may we not talk to them? Why can't we talk to these people about what's going on in their lives?
Absolutely. It's extraordinary, isn't it? It's just, it's just the problem that we have. It seems to echo here. So we will do our very best. Now, another story that I just want to bring you the headline of this one. This popped up yesterday. This is the story of this Australian man who was arrested for allegedly attempting to smuggle cocaine into Bali. So Australian man Lamar Archie, 43, facing the death penalty for allegedly trying to smuggle in 1.7 kilograms of cocaine from Thailand to Bali. So this is the pictures that they've put out there of this particular individual, 43-year-old man. He was seen later on completely covered up with a balaclava in orange prison gear. But what was interesting was watching the police in Bali explaining the thoroughness. So they'd picked up that there was some sort of trade going on, and they eventually went to where the handover was going to take place and perform the arrests. So it was like something you saw in an American TV crime show, but this was happening in the streets of Bali.
Wow.
And so you've got Thai police involved, Bali police involved, and it was quite incredible. But this person, Lamar Archie, an Australian, apparently worked in hospitality, was flying around the world all the time. So what we're seeing uncovering here, of course, it's alleged at this stage, is that you're going to get a real life example of an Australian who is likely to face the death penalty of exactly how this business model works with the importation. And what it was the cocaine was wrapped up in like they were Lindt chocolates. And you saw photographs of this. So it was quite detailed. So this is how it's been smuggled in. Extraordinary. Like that is a substantial amount of cocaine. And to think
how
that
much
this
was
is
it?
how this business works, 1.7 kilograms. Made up into literally hundreds of little chocolates, wrappers, etc., and it was detected. So there obviously was something going on for some time, a lot of surveillance there going on, but it's a big story in itself, and we haven't had an Australian since, well, of course, we had the Bali 9, and we had, of course, Chappelle Corby, that all went through hell that changed the narrative here in Australia, and there has been others in the past that have been executed in Asian countries for the importation of drugs. I remember there was the former footballer, Paul Hayward, I think, he got in trouble for 107. No, that was somebody else. He got in trouble for importing drugs. There was two that imported 179 grams of heroin. They got the death sentence. And of course, of the Bali 9, there was two that were executed in that situation. So the warnings are there why anyone is trying to import and think that they're smarter than the system and are still trying to do it.
Jason, the Australian government are the biggest importers of dangerous drugs that I've ever seen. And I'm talking about the drugs that they tell you are safe and effective. And this kid, because times are tough, has made a terrible, terrible mistake. But the Australian consulate should be trying to save this kid's life, because we just had an example of someone who's quite well to do in Australia who was found to be moving around large amounts of cocaine. He was a famous sportsman or former sportsman or something. And he just walked away, with time served, slap on the wrist. And I think the dangerous thing is, of course, you want to discourage people from doing this. I think the plan was probably to go from Thailand to Bali to Australia. I can't see him, Bali's a Muslim country. I can't see him having, great success with sales there. But it's extraordinary to me that it's one rule for ordinary people and another rule, because how many people die each year from cocaine use versus how many people die each year from mRNA injections? But there's nothing. There's crickets, there's bupkis, there's no, that we're not worried about those because they've been approved by the FDA.
Well, it's certainly another angle, isn't it? This fellow moved from Cairns to Bali in 2017, working as a marketing director at a day club. I find it interesting, though, that, look, if it is organised crime one way or another, it's the front. The way that they run under a front organisation is what I find interesting, and that applies across all sorts of organisations. I find it that when I walk down certain streets, even in my local neighbourhood, and I look at empty shops, one after the other in the main street of Maitland, and then I see other shops that are quite large, that are fully stocked, but no customers going. I go, well, how can they possibly pay the rent? How does that work? I find that fascinating just the same. Or are they just getting free rent while they wait for a DA, for example, to knock the building down and rebuild? Who knows? It's just extraordinary today when so many businesses are going broke. And people are having to take shortcuts one way or another to make things happen. But what kind of world do you live in? Don't you think the death
sentence is extreme, though, Jason, for drugs? Don't you think the death sentence is extreme? I mean, I can tell you now that person in Liverpool who drove a car and injured dozens of people will never face the death sentence, and if it's proven that it wasn't true, that it wasn't a 53-year-old British man, that it was a migrant or, not someone who's British, they probably won't even face deportation.
But I'd argue the other way, though, that why do we, just because we have leniency in Western world, are they wrong to have tough penalties in other parts of the world? If you're importing, industrial size drugs in Asia, the consequences before you go. Everyone knows that if you import drugs into Asia and you get caught, you're facing the death penalty. So, but why would you do it? But I think here in Australia, we've gone, or certainly in the West, we've gone that lenient on certain things, except of course, if it's politically motivated. If you're a J6er, you were locked up for years without due process, and that was considered to be perfectly okay. And so there's two sides to each story here. Where do you draw the line on what is severe punishment?
Well, do you believe in the death penalty? Let's have that discussion on the show. Do you believe in the death penalty for any crime?
20 years ago, I would have said no, and I would have been as woke as the rest of them, and I believed that there was no punishment. You shouldn't punish anyone. Like, seriously, that's how, and I lasted there for about 5 minutes. I think today that if you commit genocide, treason, murder, in those situations, sometimes you've got to use the death penalty. I look at some of these politicians, if they're involved with crimes against humanity, why should they? But then other people would argue that it's a tougher penalty to serve out your life in solitary confinement or some form of confinement. So that's deserving for another day, for another argument. But I think that there should be things on the table here. But then I don't think that certain people committing certain crimes can ever be rehabilitated. So if you can't rehabilitate someone who
conspiracy to commit mass murder has been going on with some of our most senior bureaucrats and maybe higher. Conspiracy to commit mass murder, and those people will never face any justice. But this kid will. Well,
again, do we let everyone off because we can't catch the bad guys, or do we have to work on catching everyone? And that's the problem with the system.
But we're the only ones that have laws. Us down here on the ground, the little people, the laws are for us. They're not for anyone who gets past, 1 billion? Is it 1 billion in your account where you suddenly get the letter in the mail from the king? Guess what? There are no laws for you anymore. You can do anything you want. It really feels like that sometimes.
Well, it certainly does. I guess the lightning rod, the first test there will be to see if Diddy is convicted. He's a billionaire. And we'll see if all that money's worth anything to him in a few weeks' time when the jury, convenes to make their decision. Of course, we haven't got onto the defence side in that particular case, and it's gone a little bit quiet, but it is Memorial Day weekend in the US, so I would expect more coverage on that tomorrow. But based on what I saw in 60 Minutes, that guy is in a whole lot of trouble, and we'll see what is going here. So if Diddy were to get a life sentence, that certainly changes things. He will lose pretty much all of his money at that point. That'll just get sued away. And it's just a very interesting point in history. But I certainly don't want to. Well, I wonder if this is the argument, right? If the case in the US that they want to let everyone out so that when the politicians eventually, if and when they do get rounded up, will go, well, we shouldn't get any more punishment more than the people have been getting for the last 5 years. So therefore, we'll get a slap on the wrist. We'll spend 6 months at home on detention, and then we'll get back into it. Oh, look, the aliens have arrived. You're going to need us to help negotiate with those guys.
Yes. The setting of legal precedents, you may be correct there. The setting of legal precedents is very important for them to be able to refer to in future cases.
It's unreal, isn't it? So what we've really uncovered there is that we can have take some opinion, some debate, but there is something else behind the scenes, and you have to flesh it out, don't you, to work out what's really going in terms of what they really want to get. It's all a manipulation, and you can always bet that power and authority is serving itself because of the self-interest. And that's a quote from Paul Keating. It's obvious. It makes me so frustrated and angry with the system that it is always about them, and they pretend it's about us and the people that just go along with it, mainly because they think that there's a little bit in it for them, whether it be part of the system, a handout, or a reason not to have to do anything, or some form of entitlement. But it's always based on a level of weakness, not strength, that people will attach themselves to others that seem to have the power, even if they're going to be not served by said power.
Well, they're not an authority and they're not a power. They're not even up to the job, right? They're incompetent. Jacinta Allen wants to hold the weapons responsible and not the people holding the weapons. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. It's funny because there are certain pharmaceutical weapons that they won't hold to account, but they'll hold machetes to account. And, they held guns to account. These people are completely incompetent. They're not looking at the psychology of society, the makeup of society. They've made no attempts for people to, blend into society. What's it called when they assimilate into society? We were always told that was of paramount importance in the UK. These people don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're talking about. Well, they do, but they deliberately say nonsensical stuff. And then they have the gall to put their clips sounding incompetent on social media, looking for praise for it. I find it extraordinary. I always say that saying, disappointed but not surprised. These people have got no clue. They couldn't run a 7-Eleven. I wouldn't leave Jacinta Allen or Dan Andrews or Anthony Albanese in my house for the weekend to feed my dogs. By the way, large dogs are a good idea in Australia right now.
Yeah, fair point. Well, everything that you've just said points to where we are post-election, with the announcement of a brand new senator, a very young 21-year-old Charlotte Walker, who just turned 21 on election night. Is set to become South Australia's 6th senator there, out of the 6 that have been elected, 3 from the Australian Labor Party, 2 from the Liberals, and 1 from the Greens. Charlotte Walker, 21 years of age. There she is. Voting number 1 Labor in the Senate, 20% off your student debt, $25 scripts, free TAFE, another tax cut, more support for first home buyers, blah, 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 blah. When I was 21 years of age, I was in my final year of an arts degree at university, couldn't wait to get out of there and go and try and get myself a job, like most of us do when you get through. Didn't know anything about anything at that stage. And here's a 21-year-old that's going to be in the House of Review. Is she going to review anything, or is she basically a rubber stamp?
I think she'll be in there to learn, and she will be considered a future asset by the powers that be, because she will have been in it from such a young age. I believe her salary will be over $220,000 a year. I think it's really worrying. I'm all for the young, but you certainly don't know the difference between right and wrong at the age of 21. And she wouldn't understand at this point, I hazard a guess, the nature of the evil that she is entering, to be quite frank, but she will soon find out. And she will either go off in a good direction once she wakes up, or she will become part of the machine. But it's very surprising, and I'm a little disappointed in you, South Australia, that situation occurred. But let's just hope for good things. I mean, we do need to know how young people are feeling and thinking about things. But of course, if you've got someone who's working with a group of people who are misleading the public, that won't be such a great outcome. But let's see. I'm on the fence at this point, Jason.
Yeah, look, extraordinary, isn't it, to think how hard people try to get elected and how much work they do, and then you can get in like a lottery in that situation. Surely she'd never expected to be elected, nor did the ALP. And if they did, they would have put somebody in there if they would have thought that a number 3 was going to get through, that they owed something to in that situation. Or she is a real talent, Charlotte Walker, so we'll certainly keep an eye out on what's going there. Nicola, that's the first 99 shows in the can. Tomorrow, our 100th celebration, if you will. On Wednesday, the 28th of May, we'll be back for a big one to celebrate 3 figures. How about it?
100th birthday tomorrow, and it will be a little bit of a party. We're going to share some pictures and information about our personal lives and what we feel about things privately on tomorrow's show. So don't miss that on the Daily Australian tomorrow. Thank you for watching us again today. I hope we've shared some important information with you. Go away and discuss it and draw your own conclusions. Use your own mind. Thank you for watching myself, Nicola Charles, and my co-host and co-producer, Jason Olbourne. We will see you tomorrow with bells on for our 100th anniversary. See you then.